Hello there, and welcome to a special edition of the Mr. Nowak's Classroom Virtually Relevant Podcast, Election Edition. We are here with Renfrew County Public School Trustee candidate, Mr. John Scott, former principal of RCI. He's going to join us and talk about his election campaign and what he's really about. So, Mr. Scott, why did you choose to put your name into the race?
Well, I have been involved with education for a large part of my life. I basically, for 35 years, through my Faculty of Ed and 34 years of teaching, and as an administrator, guidance counselor, most of it here in Renfrew County. And I think that one of my key beliefs or goals was always about student success. And after retiring and leaving the profession, it's the one thing I've missed are the students. And I think one way I can help in the future with students and student success and supporting them in a few areas, and I would mention special ed, extracurricular, and equitable funding, as three things that I have on my agenda that if I was a board member would be a high priority. And I think they all work towards student success and improving the culture in a school and environment of the students.
So much of our electorate maybe grew up through the education system in an old school way. When you say student success, what does that mean in today's educational world?
Well, I think the priority is that one goal, and I'm talking about the board, the director, the senior administration, school administration, the principal, and teachers all have to realize that our job is to have students succeed. My belief is that all students can be successful in our system. And we have to do everything possible to nurture that and move that students forward so that they can achieve that success. I think we've got to get over the old times when teachers try to trick students. It shouldn't be a trick. That's not how you learn. That's not how knowledge is gained. And so there are a whole bunch of benchmarks out there. I'm not tied to benchmarks, but the provincial government has put benchmarks in place. We have the literacy test, so you have to graduate. We have grade 9 math. There's all the students would be familiar with the grade 3 and 6 literacy and math things. Those are all benchmarks. I don't know that they're the best tool, but I think they're things, the higher pass rate on the literacy test in a school assures that group of students that they can succeed in the system. And that should be part of our goal. Every teacher, either that they're teaching a shop class, math class, science class, an English class, or a geography class, it all should be about literacy, moving it ahead, and so that students get used to that. Because out in the world of work, that's one of the key things. Communications is part of where the future of Canada. We're not going to be making things anymore. There are other places in the world that make them much cheaper. So we're graduating students and citizens who are going out into the world of work, and they have to pick up some skills. And one skill that they have to have is literacy.
You mentioned special education, something that through your career has been near and dear to your heart. And the Renfrew family of schools, we have a high need population of spec ed. Talk about your philosophy about special education and maybe what you would like to see happen within this Renfrew family of schools.
Well, just to start off, I guess my interest lies in that area. I had two students who were identified specialized students, went through, and my daughter particularly was very successful early in her educational career. And my son, after a period of time, has also become very successful. I would suggest that if I was tested, I probably have some learning disabilities, definitely around language. And so I think the one thing I would point out about the Renfrew board, it's a leader in the province. Always had, but it had a special ed services in place probably 5 years prior to most boards in the province of Ontario, and definitely before the provincial government funded it. That was a gentleman called Don Reichley, who was the superintendent, and then he became director, and then that became a priority move forward. And I think that is one of the reasons that we do have an excellent program, and we particularly do here at Renfrew Collegiate. That's sort of indicated by the fact that the last three consultants in the special ed department have actually come out of the RCI special ed. But so students here in the school who are familiar with the special ed department, it's excellent here. Moving forward, I think we have to sit down with our consultants or specialists and say what is necessary to maintain or improve our program. And we can't let it slip back. And when I retired, I felt the program was doing an excellent job. But as time goes on, you can't stay in one place. It's like everything else in education.
In your opening statement, you also mentioned about equitable funding. What do you mean by that?
Well, that is something, and when I talk about equitable funding, it's not that it's a new thing, and it's not something that the board has not addressed in the past. And board members, some board members have made it a priority. I know senior men, senior men have made it a priority. And I think when I say that, I would like to be in a position where I could try to get everybody on goal, and let's get back on that. So giving examples, because there are several examples of equitable funding. One example would be in transportation. The ministry funds equally. Now, if you're a student living in an apartment on Bloor Street in Toronto, you have a choice to go to two schools. You can go to Runnymede, or you can go to Bloor High School. I'll just speak secondary this time. Those schools are, I would say, about 3 miles apart. Everything over a mile can be funded for transportation, right? And I'm sure there's some students who are going to be listening to this and say, I live a mile from school and I walk every day. But we're talking about how things are funded. In Renfrew County, a student in Whitney travels to Barry's Bay, probably over 30 kilometers. If they're in MacArthur Mills, they're probably going over 40 kilometers, because I know they get up and get on the bus shortly after 6 o'clock in the morning. That's probably one reason that school doesn't start at 8 o'clock in the morning. Hardwood Lake, Round Lake, coming in there. I'm talking about that area, but if you were living up towards Griffith on the far side of Centennial, which I know a number of the students at RCI are, they're in the same predicament. Same funding, equal funding to transport that student. As enrollments declined in the province of Ontario, particularly in rural Ontario, and we notice it here at the high school and in all the schools across Renfrew County, that with declining enrollment, you have declining funding. If there's 5 kids 5 years ago coming from Hardwood Lake, and now there's only 1, we still have to run the bus, and there is a cost. When I talk about equitable funding, somewhere in there, I'll just finish up. The end of this is in Metro, in Toronto, they have a huge surplus in transportation. So they get to move that into special ed, curriculum, other areas. So that's why they actually have more specialists in that. They need them in some cases, but they have a lot more specialists per capita in that area. In Renfrew County, we have to borrow from other pools to pay our transportation costs because it runs a deficit. Equitable funding. Another example would be sometimes here, student signs up for a course. There are only 9 students. We say, sorry, we're cutting the course because there's not enough students. And we're forced to maybe run that course every second year. Or it gets cut every year and never runs, and eventually it just disappears. If we had 22 students, the government funds us somewhere about that. And I don't know those exact figures anymore because I've been away from it for a while. But if you were at Runnymede High School, they probably had the number of students. But if they only had 9, they would phone Bloor High School and say, they have 15. And I would talk about maybe calculus might be one, although that might, I would try and think of one that might be a music program or an extended French program. And so they just transfer the busing. That student attends Bloor because it's only 3.5 miles away. They get funding for that section. Here, we don't have funding to run it for 9 students. And there are many examples I can go through. So when you talk about equitable funding is getting away from equal funding. Equal funding may be fine for metro areas, Ottawa, Toronto, Mississauga, Kitchener-Waterloo, the Hamilton, that greater area. London probably, but we're talking about where there's large populations. It's fine to do it equal, but every student should have the same opportunity. They shouldn't have to do e-learning. They shouldn't have to wait 2 years to do a course. Does that answer?
Yeah, no, that's more than I expected, actually. Now, throughout your career, coaching, football, track and field, was a big part of cheerleading, gymnastics, was a large part of what you believed in. So, and I believe you want to, continue what we have or improve it. What role can a trustee have, or will you bring to maintain this extracurricular programming in the Renfrew family of schools?
Well, I think it's priority, extracurricular. We talked about student success a few minutes ago. Student success is about keeping a person here and getting them a diploma, right? And I would be an example, and I have several friends who have been school principals and went on to be doctors who, if we hadn't have had a football program at my high school, we probably would all have been working on farms along the 3rd line and the 4th line of Bathurst, which is, by the way, in Perth, Ontario, where I grew up. I think that's only one aspect, and that's not the only reason for doing it. It produces citizenship. It builds self-confidence. You see students who started in grade 9 and in grade 12, they are giving you big indications that they could be leaders in the community. And they don't have to be the academic person going to university. They don't have to be the person going to trade. They some may go to labor. They go to a whole bunch of different areas. But they take with it, I've made a commitment and I'll be there to practice. I made a commitment, I'll be there at job. I'll manage my schooling and pass, same as I'll manage the things I have to do around home when I have a family, because work is a priority. That's where I got my money from. So I think the real thing about it is it builds character for citizens that we want graduating. I'm not talking about whether they go to university, to trades, to this or that. Now, to answer your question, getting it back to the issue of what I can do, there is a pool of money that is granted to schools for late busing, for extracurricular activies or extra things in the school. And I don't think that budget has actually changed a lot over the years. And that might be fair to say with declining enrollment. I think the principals are doing an excellent job of managing that. But somewhere in there, I think here at RCI now, it started just about the time I retired, where we were going down to 3 days a week. And my understanding now is the 2 days a week. And sometimes that doesn't allow all students. And again, we want to talk about the word equitable and equal. You know, getting to practice for a kid in town, should they be on the team because they can get home? The student who's living in Calabogie or Ashdad or Dacre, who really wants to play and maybe a very good player, should have the same opportunity. So that's one area where, because it might come up sometime that they will cut that. And then that eliminates all our rural students to some extent from participating. And I think that's one area that I would make sure it doesn't happen, if I could.
So throughout your career, you served as a classroom teacher, as a guidance counselor, as a vice principal, and as a principal. So that is a plethora of experience. First of all, looking back on your career, what role did you enjoy the most?
I always get asked that question. I enjoyed being a vice principal the most. I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy the principal's job, because the principal's job did give me some time to get out and do some other things for student success. One of the issues is the more you did, the farther you got away from students, and that was disappointing. Vice principal's job I enjoyed the most because I thought you could bring a significant change in a person's life. And I'm in changing, keeping them. Everybody thinks the vice principal throws you out of school. Discipline. Yes, they do discipline, but discipline is right there. It's all written down. You do this, you get this. You do this, you get this. I always said it's cut and dried. I'm not God here. I'm just doing, you know the rules. This is the consequence. But you can change that. You may change a student somehow. You can bring, I don't want to use the word save, because that's not what you're doing. Because every student has the qualities. Sometimes they just stray from the norm. And I think that part was very rewarding. Now, that being said, the vice principal's or principal's job, you were able to bring about change that was for the betterment of the whole school. So, they're both very close. And, classroom teachers also do it every day. So, guidance counselors, that's their function. So, I guess I like them all. I'm sorry, but the vice principal is because I'm not necessarily a multitasker, and it allowed me to look at this person. And I know at one school I was at, I met with one girl every Friday for 3 years. And she graduated and went on to college, and I've never had anything from her. She came to see me the last day I was at the school and talked to me for about half an hour. But she will be successful.
And it's those kind of stories that make our careers in education so worthwhile. So getting back to the diversity of experiences that you've had, how would that help you in the role as trustee?
Well, I think I understand school budgets and how they work. I understand board budgets and where the money comes from. Not only was because I was a principal, but I also did some sitting down on the behalf of the principals group here with the board accountants. So I know what the budget sheets look like. So I understand that. No, I'm not saying I know it perfectly. Understand the school ones, and I, to a great extent, understand the board ones. I know about staffing. I have a fairly good idea of student success. I know that it has evolved. I'm a big supporter of character education. And I was one of the initial people at CAS, which was the Senior Principals Secondary, when we developed it. I was probably one of the first administrators to wire their school for so that we have internet in all rooms. I know it was the first. I probably had more. What's that thing called now? That's a whiteboard, right? Or
Smartboard.
Smartboard.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I may not know the name, but I think we had more in this school than we were one of the first schools to have that.
And I think that's something we've taken for granted. You go to other schools and you look in a classroom and a smartboard isn't there, and you realize how lucky we've been at Renfrew Collegiate and the whole Renfrew family of schools of the technology that is available to us.
Yeah. And so I understand board policy. I work with board policy, both board policy as it fits to their policy, which involves students, their policy, which involves staff. And I hired staff for 10 years, and I managed staff, as many as 75 on at one time. So those are all, I think, key things, knowing something about or having a really reasonably extensive value. I think I have confidence in saying that. So I'm hitting the ground running a little bit.
And one of the things I think I forgot to mention is your experience on the others. You had the management experience, but you also had the union side of it. Yeah. With your involvement with OSSTF. So knowing the collective agreement, knowing some of the wants, the needs, the struggles of teachers, that can't not help you understand some of the issues from a staff perspective.
That's right. Yeah, I always felt that, it's a process. And I think some people get carried away. There's these people and these people. It's not. It's a process. And there's a point in time where I would have to say no. To teachers, if I was on negotiations now are provincial. There are some other areas where we do discuss things, but I think you have to appreciate exactly where people are and they're coming from, and have a respect for it. And I think during my time as administrator, I think I got along very well with the unions, and I think I also got along very well with senior administration on how I was running my school, because I didn't have too many interferences.
And you never shied away from asking the hard questions, and you never shied away from speaking your mind, which I think can be advantageous in the political arena.
At the right time. And it's about time. And I definitely will speak my mind on certain issues that are dear to me. I think there's some movement that maybe come to the forefront in the future, but I think that myself, I do speak my mind. That might be a bad thing sometimes.
Since you retired, you've embraced the new role of being a grandfather. So, final question. Now, your grandkids are growing up in the Peterborough area and the Toronto area, but in an ideal world, what experiences in education would you like your grandkids to have that you would then like to see in the Renfrew County District School Board? What is important that your grandkids learn?
To be a good citizen. I think be literate, leave school with the tools so that you can live a life, support a family. Nowadays, it seems that two people have to earn that money to support a family. But the whole issue is around a person must be literate. They must have a reasonable understanding of numeracy, and they must endear the qualities that we have as Canadians. And those are, we share. Like, that's why, like, we have a fantastic medical program in Canada, and our neighbors, who are 300 million people, argue over the reason 40 million of them don't have any health care. Like, I mean, understand why we do that. And just the respect of other individuals and human beings. If we were all doing that all over the world, we wouldn't be shooting people all over the world and running wars. I think our job as educators, and I would want my children, I want anything grandeur for them. And I think all the tools are here, and the general scope, there will be an evaluation. So we have good teachers in front of them. They engage them in what they're doing. But when we really break everything down, it comes down to a few things. And we give those tools and we can graduate them. I think they'll be successful.
So that is leading into the municipal election coming up Monday, October 27th. Renfrew residents should have received a PIN number this week where you can vote online. There's a number of ways to contact John for more information. He is on the Twitter at Elect John Scott. He's on the Facebook. If you visit facebook.com/Elect John Scott 2014. And you can email him at elect.johnscott2014@gmail.com. I think you and I would both agree that it's important to get out and vote.
It's part of being a citizen.
And our municipal turnout across the province hasn't been great. I've heard about 38%. I would love to see Renfrew and surrounding area demolish that number. So get out and vote, whether you're voting for John or not. Preferably, I hope you do, but get out and vote. And this has been a special edition of the Mr. Nowak's Virtually Relevant Classroom podcast. Thank you for listening, and take care.